And what we talk about today may generate some strong feelings in you that you don't expect. So it's important to know that you can access crisis support 24/7, no matter where you are. For the National Crisis Text Line, you can text DE to 741-741, or you can access the Delaware Hope Line by calling 1-833-9-HOPE-DE, or by texting DE Hope 55753. I'd like to now go ahead and introduce our presenter. Attorney General Kathy Jennings was born and raised in Wilmington, Delaware. She graduated from Mount Pleasant High School, University of Delaware, and Villanova University Law School before joining the Delaware Department of Justice. As a prosecutor, Kathy has handled scores of cases, including matters of domestic violence, sexual assault, and murder. After years of service in the office, Kathy was named Delaware State Prosecutor and later went on to serve as Chief Deputy Attorney General. While serving as Chief Deputy, Kathy, along with others, created the Consumer Fraud Division to protect consumers against fraud and abuse. After working in private practice for years, Kathy returned to the Department of Justice to serve as State Prosecutor under Attorney Generals Beau Biden and Matt Dehn. Under their leadership, Kathy successfully sought legislation ending mandatory life sentences for people convicted of drug crimes, worked with the police chiefs to create a model body-worn cameras policy, and secured funding to get the life-saving drug Narcan into the hands of first responders. As Delaware's Attorney General, Kathy Jennings is focused on making the criminal justice system more fair and equal for everyone, regardless of the color of your skin, the size of your bank account, or the zip code where you live. This presentation will have a question and answer session at the end. Please type any questions or comments in the chat box, and we will try to answer as many as possible. I will now turn it over to the Attorney General.
Thank you, Amanda, and good afternoon, NAMI Delaware. I want to begin by thanking you for inviting me and taking some time to chat with me. And hopefully I will be able to have some conversation at the end of my fairly brief presentation. But I have to tell you that every year when I speak with all of you, it's one of the happiest events and most fulfilling organizations that I am a part of, because each and every one of you is a hero in your own right. And so I encourage everyone to ask me questions and for us to really just have a chat. I'm so grateful for the work that NAMI does. This organization is very close to my heart. The problems that you work on still aren't getting the level of attention that they deserve. NAMI and its staff and volunteers spend each day educating the public on mental health, advocating for greater access to services, providing support to those in need, and connecting them with additional help, and ultimately helping our state and our nation understand the reality of mental health in America. Let me begin with telling you a story, and it's a story about my brother, Rick. My brother, he's actually was my stepbrother. I have 4 stepbrothers, and Rick was the oldest of my stepbrothers. He was such a kind and gentle man who, as a teenager, began to show symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia. It was early in his 20s when he was first diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. And for the next 50 years, he would live a life that I can tell you is no surprise to you, sometimes very much in the margins. He at times got in trouble with the law, and he at times was very close to living as a homeless person on the streets of Wilmington. I call Rick my hero because he sought help after one of those run-ins with the law. And we worked together for years. One of my brothers is a psychiatrist, and all of us worked with Rick for years and years to manage the medications that he was receiving, And really, it was Rick who gained a much deeper understanding of his own illness. He turned into what I would call a beautiful mind. If you went into Rick's apartment later in life, you really couldn't walk around too well because the apartment was full of books on the environment. He probably knew more about the environment than anybody currently at the EPA. It was a passion of his. Global warming was a grave concern of his, and he couldn't get enough knowledge. The neighbors who lived around Rick grew to love him because they also saw this kind and gentle man who so quietly struggled with a very, very difficult mental illness. One of my last conversations with my brother was when he was living in this apartment and was doing pretty well. And I said, Rick, how are you managing? How are you managing things? And he said, you know, Kathy, I hear voices. He said, I know they're there. And he said, I have to meditate and I have to with every ounce of my strength, get myself back to a place where I can handle this. That was a battle Rick lived each and every day until the day he died. In our family, he is beloved. He will always be remembered by us, by all of our children at this point in my life, and soon by their children as a hero. And I think there's so many heroes who battle mental illness who don't get maybe the help that Rick eventually was able to get and to live a good, long, productive life. So with that said, I understand the struggle and how difficult it can be to get through. I also understand that so many of us don't even recognize when we are going through very difficult and struggling times. When I began my career as a young prosecutor in the Attorney General's office, I was the second woman to join the criminal division in the entire office. It truly was a man's world. And I remember struggling myself with managing the caseload that I had. I was trying domestic violence cases, rape cases, child abuse cases, child death cases, and other homicides. And I looked around me and I saw that so many of the men in the office, so many of all of us, frankly, were handling the trauma and stress of a daily diet of man's inhumanity to man in ways that were entirely unhealthy. And it was only later in my own career that I realized, you know, I'm not handling things in a healthy way. And I had the courage to go seek counseling for all of the things that had preceded. And so many of the prosecutors in our office today and social workers in our office, they're working every day on cases that also involve murder, rape, domestic violence, and child victims. They see horrific crime scenes and work with victims who have experienced unthinkable trauma. And this is so true of our first responders as well. They immerse themselves in these experiences over and over again for months at a time. In the best cases, they are able to secure justice, but in others, they may lose a case or have to tell a victim or a family that a case cannot be prosecuted. Many of them watch in real time as an innocent child's future decays because of trauma, poverty, and other issues that are so bigger and deeper than a single crime. And in many cases, they, like me, felt that we can't talk about these experiences with anyone. Prosecutors, social workers, first responders have important and rewarding missions. And I am so proud to work with hundreds of people who are singularly committed to others. But this work is lonely work at times, and it is too heavy for them to carry alone. We used to think, as I did, that people just got hardened as they did their jobs, but we've come to understand that they are actually grappling with vicarious trauma. And we are socialized to deal with that, as I have said, initially in unhealthy ways. One of the most important missions I have in the Office of the Attorney General is to make sure that people who are first responders, who are prosecutors, social workers, and everyone who interacts with violent crime get the help that they need, and that we support them in doing so. Mental health is an endemic issue in the justice system, as you well know. I believe strongly that we have to disabuse ourselves of the notion that the millions of Americans who have mental illness are dangerous. At the same time, it is impossible to talk honestly about criminal justice without having a serious conversation about mental health and substance abuse. In 2017, a report from Delaware's Behavioral Health Consortium estimated that 82% of Delaware inmates struggle with a mental illness or a substance abuse problem. There are obviously instances when incarceration is the only appropriate way to keep people safe. But there are other cases where putting someone in prison does nothing to make us safer, and in fact, can exacerbate a problem by disconnecting people from help for an untreated or undiagnosed mental health issue. That contributes to a vicious cycle of arrest, incarceration, release, and recidivism that harms the individual, strains the system, costs taxpayers, and does little to make our communities safer. Justice needs to be humane. And part of our job as prosecutors is to understand and account for mental health needs when we are working on case resolutions or on post-release conditions. This conversation has garnered a new level of public interest as our state and our nation grapples with a debate on the past, present, and future of policing in America. Mental health is critical to that debate. That's not to say that a better approach to mental health is a substitute for things like legal accountability and public transparency. But the inescapable truth is that any solution to the problems of police-community relations that excludes mental health is an incomplete solution at best. This is a challenge that pervades the entire system. The trauma and vicarious trauma that arise in our communities, and particularly in our communities of color, from stories of police interactions, the mental health and wellness of police officers themselves, and the inescapable reality that the police are often called to respond to mental health crises that nobody besides a trained professional can be expected to navigate. Nobody is well served by continuing to allow mental health problems to be a gateway to the criminal justice system when we should be finding more gateways for people to find help and treatment. I was so happy to see this year that the Newcastle County Police Department has expanded its behavioral health unit to ensure that mental health professionals are in the car, on scene in these critical moments, and to formalize a continuum of care through a partnership with Christiana Care. It is my hope that we will see those initiatives multiply and that state leaders and grant funders will recognize the public safety and public health benefits of funding similar programs. Tragically, this is also a daily problem in the juvenile justice system. We know that children who live in unstable housing, go to impoverished schools, and play in unsafe neighborhoods are likelier to struggle with health problems, including mental health problems. These are social determinants of health, and it is staggering to consider how many children are suffering without any kind of recognition or treatment. Our office and many others recognize that generations of children have been systematically underserved. Oftentimes, kids are already dealing with trauma or a mental health problem, whether it's been diagnosed or not, by the time we come into contact with them. We want to wrap our arms around these children to get them the services that they need and to give them an honest shot at rehabilitation. Part of my focus over the last year and for the rest of my term is going to be advocating for the kind of justice that these children deserve. To that end, we included mental health considerations throughout an internal policy reform memo that I issued upon entering office. Those include, number one, directing prosecutors to take defendants' mental health needs into account when fashioning resolutions in a criminal case. When it is safe to do so, diverting people away from the criminal justice system altogether when their needs can be met by treatment. Never imposing zero tolerance conditions, as historically had been imposed, on people seeking drug, alcohol, or mental health treatment, because the path to rehabilitation is never linear and never requiring admissions of guilt as a prerequisite to entry into court-run diversion programs. I'm proud to say that we have a number of alternative courts in Delaware, including mental health court, DUI court, which are meant to identify those in the system as a result of serious mental health issues and to connect them with intensive services and support for recovery and self-sufficiency. There is also, I should mention, Veterans Court, which does a fantastic job in helping our veterans. Law enforcement is also internalizing this mission, and that's so important because police are oftentimes the first responders who are likeliest to come into contact when someone is experiencing a mental health crisis. A number of police departments in Delaware are implementing crisis intervention teams and equipping their public safety programs with mental health resources. We have been working with the Delaware State Police, who are far along in this process. And I am so proud of all of the first responders in this state who recognize this need. But the most important step we can take is exactly what all of you already commit yourselves to: improving awareness and access to treatment so that we can address mental health and trauma early on. Mental health is a critical conversation in the justice system, but justice-involved individuals are only one part of the larger picture on mental health in America. The reality is that there is no such thing as someone else's struggle. All of us are affected by mental illness, whether we are personally among the millions of Americans who live with mental illness, like my brother Rick, whether it affects a friend, a loved one, or whether we are simply affected by living in communities where our healthcare system, despite the excellent work that providers do, is not reaching many of the people who need it the most. If we are ever going to achieve true parity for mental health, not only in a policy sense, but in our culture and in our attitudes, it will be because of the patients, experts, and advocates who stood up to talk about mental illness openly, to destigmatize treatment, and to normalize self-care. You all do such amazing work day in and day out. I am proud to have worked with you over the years. I am proud to be with you today, and I am proud to be a partner with you in your mission. And with that said, I would very much like to chat with you.
Thank you so much, Attorney General. That was wonderful. We've had a couple questions come in, but just a reminder to everyone, if you have more questions that you'd like to ask of the Attorney General, please put them in the chat box so that we can get to them, hopefully, during this presentation. So one question we received was, how do we normalize getting help for police officers and other first responders and other people who are experiencing secondary and vicarious trauma? How do we normalize getting help for them so that they're not living with that trauma and experiencing worse symptoms because of it?
I think we've come a long way from the many decades ago when I began in the office and no one even talked about vicarious trauma, but we still have a long way to go. I believe that the best way to get people help who are experiencing, mostly first responders and prosecutors in the office, people who, I mean, in all walks of life, if you are exposed to trauma, you should be able to get help. I believe the way to start in any organization is to have the courage to talk about it and to remind people on a regular basis to get the care that they need. And I think it also has to be culturally acceptable in an organization to acknowledge vicarious trauma and to go get help. And if an organization has a culture where that's a healthy thing, then I think we're a long way toward the goal of recognizing vicarious trauma and making sure that first responders get the help that they need. I remember when I was state prosecutor and I was interviewing applicants for a position in our office that is the prosecutor is in charge of child pornography cases in the state. That's a tough job. That's an incredibly gut-wrenching, difficult, stressful job. And I asked every applicant, what are you going to do? How are you going to deal with what you see and what you experience and the harm to children that you're going to see? And of all the applicants, one person answered the question, I'm going to go see a counselor because there's no way I can deal with this without some outside help. And I just thought, this is great. We're finally in our office recognizing the importance of outside help.
Great, thank you. I had another question that was, how do you suggest or how do you see maybe other places doing this where we can create a more trauma-informed group of first responders as well, so that they understand the effects of trauma? You spoke a little bit about juvenile mental health and the juvenile criminal justice system, and how can we maybe encourage or work towards a more trauma-informed group of first responders?
Education. I think education. You know, we all get trainings, we all get them, and then 2 or 3 years from now, we may not remember everything that we were trained on. So I think it's relentless education. This should be part of our daily lives in the criminal justice system. And we have to look at jurisdictions that are doing better. We have to look at innovative programs to see if they're working. I know that the Delaware State Police did a thorough search all over the country of how to most effectively intervene in a mental health crisis and divert someone away from the criminal justice system. It's just remarkable work that they're doing. I know the Newcastle County Police have done that. There are places in the country that have set up, Eugene, Oregon being one, and Colorado being the one most recently, that have set up entire programs where, as long as there's not a threat to public safety, counselors are going to interventions and the police are staying behind. And so I'm not saying this is easy, but what I've also known is for the decades that the Department of Justice has been investigating and examining police-involved shootings, for example, a significant segment of those shootings has at its core untreated mental illness. And I think every police officer who's been at one would tell you the same thing. And there has to be a better way that we can get at that earlier on.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, does your office keep data to indicate if all of the clients you refer for intensive case management actually receive what is needed?
Yes, well, the court keeps it and we keep it. If it is court involved in one of the diversion courts, whether it's mental health court, veterans court, or DUI court, we track success rates, and that's very carefully tracked. Um, and and so I think it's incumbent upon organizations to make sure they are keeping this type of data to see what is effective and what isn't effective, because diversion court is a great thing. And I think in Delaware, it's being done extremely well by really committed judges. But I think we do need to say, look, every day, are we doing the best we can? And should we have referred this person there or not? And if not, what can we do better next time? So yes, it's important that we track data. We have started to track data in a variety of ways. And I think it's really important to make sure if the decisions we're making in these situations are the best decisions.
Thank you. The next question we had was, do you think that professionals you come in contact with are encouraged or provided training to understand their own mental health needs in order to seek the available supports?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. I think it's so easy for us to point to other people. It's kind of human nature where we say, I know what you need to do differently. You need help, you need this, you need that. But it's really hard to look inside ourselves and recognize that we may need that help. And so it's important to have that introspective aspect to our work where people aren't telling us, you're not handling this well, you need to go get help. We're telling ourselves, I'm not handling all this trauma very well. I need to go get help. And then for that not to become a stigmatizing event, because that's what keeps people from getting the help they need. I think they're worried about somebody making a joke out of it, or they're worried about behind their backs, people talking about them. That's why I'm pretty open about, I knew I needed it. I was making really bad decisions, and I knew a lot of it flowed from the trauma I was seeing on a daily basis that just stayed inside of me.
Thank you. Let me see. Someone asked, why isn't more being done to help the houseless and homeless population?
It's really important that we do that. And we have, oh my gosh, in this pandemic, it's been incredibly challenging for homeless people to get the help that they need. I know that shelters have remained open, but the problem is, are there people able to be out there and physically present with the follow through that's so badly needed? And so it has to be a priority of government to make sure that we're taking care of the most needy among us. We're only as good as the neediest person in our big Delaware family. And I think it's just incumbent upon us to make homelessness and the care that people need and the underlying substance abuse issues or mental illness, and sometimes both, that we need to take care of people. We need to give them the help they need.
Great. And kind of bouncing off of talking about the pandemic, someone brought up the pandemic has obviously put a strain on the state, federal, and nonprofits. Could you comment if this will have any effect on support for the mental health efforts?
All I can say is I hope not. I think the economy is not in great shape nationally, as we all know. All you have to do is read the paper every day or watch the news every day. The economy is not in great shape. I am optimistic that we will be okay. But whenever, there are financial constraints, there are cuts, and that concerns me a great deal. I think it's an unsettling time. And what really worries me is so many people have lost their jobs. So many people who had started businesses have had to shut down, and they may or may not open. Uh, and I just think we're gonna need to really come together as the community and the state of neighbors that Governor Carney, likes to call us, and he's right about that. We are a state of neighbors, and we're going to have a lot of neighbors that we need to be helping out.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Kind of bouncing to a different topic, but someone said sometimes folks who are suffering from schizophrenia or other mental health issues we see do not realize that they are in need of care. How can the system best address the needs of people who can't make the decision to care for themselves?
That's a particularly thorny issue. It took my brother years. We knew we knew what was going on, but he just did not recognize it and would not accept it. And for him, it was standing in front of a judge in the Superior Court to say, oh, I think I really need to finally come to grips with this. Um, I mean, he had a real respect for authority and had been in the military for a while. And I think there was some kind of awakening at that moment, but it was years in the making. My advice based on my brother is to never give up, to never give up, but just to love the person and to keep trying. And, he had a loving family who kept trying.
Do you have any comments or suggestions for anyone who is like looking into guardianship efforts or like looking to, become like someone who can make a decision on behalf of people?
Yeah, I mean, Delaware has a very good guardianship route through the Court of Chancery, and they have struggled, but not struggled, I'm sorry. They have made it very user friendly. And I would really encourage, if someone is thinking about that, to talk to some organizations that, specialize in guardianships and to really get a deeper understanding of what that entails.
Great. Yeah. So people are asking, can the laws be changed in any way to help those who cannot make good decisions for themselves to accept care? You see anywhere else where maybe that's happening, or it's kind of a sticky situation, but I think loved ones are just looking for ways to really try and finally get that service.
Sure, and guardianship is a possibility in that scenario. It's just really difficult because some families, many families, frankly, um, they try over and over and over again to have a person get the help that they need, to stick with it. And so often, they see themselves as helpless because it's not working. Unfortunately, the system just doesn't have a lot of options. We believe that, and I strongly believe people have free will, self-determination, and it's a tricky question about when that self-determination is so endangering the person that they need to, comes up in the criminal justice system all the time. It's tragic, but it does. I mean, we can't allow people who are a true danger to other human beings to be released. But at the same time, if someone is not a danger and they're really and truly struggling, to find answers, it's incumbent upon us to help them.
Great, thank you. We had a question come in. What would you suggest, or what are you seeing being done maybe that to decrease the inequalities when it comes to race in our criminal justice system? And if you have anything you kind of are planning on doing or looking to doing, maybe touching on that as well.
Sure. I am part of the Law Enforcement Accountability Task Force that the General Assembly formed to look at solutions to the instances in which police use of force, for example, is excessive. How do we deal with this? How do we help the police train? How do we fashion laws that provide some objectivity on the nature of use of force? And it's interesting, in our first subcommittee meeting, I chair the use of force subcommittee, and we started delving into the uses of deadly force that we've seen over the, let's say, past 10 years in our state. And inevitably, I mean, I knew it was coming, but I didn't raise it. I wanted to hear if others would. Several people on the subcommittee talked about mental illness and how if we don't get at this issue of mental illness and recognize it and treat it, then that person can go down a path where they end up getting shot because they're not in their right mind at the time. And if we had gotten to that earlier, that situation may never have happened. And so poverty is a big part of this. People who are poor, who themselves may not understand what's going on with them. I know my brother didn't, and he was not poor, but he had no insight. And people may not understand what's going on with them. That's why I don't want to put too much on schools, because frankly, the teachers have to be everything and then some. But it is important to have mental health professionals in schools to recognize early when help is needed. And I think that would be a big benefit.
Great, thank you. We had a question that you may be able to touch on. If you have a loved one, or if you know of like a patient who you think would be good for mental health court or vet court, do you have any advice or knowledge about how to get connected to both of those resources?
Sure. They are available through our Superior Court and through the Court of Common Pleas. They generally take in individuals who have some justice involvement. And then they direct those people to services. So the court typically is dealing with someone who is already justice involved. So if the loved one or relative or friend has pending criminal cases, and you know that what's going on with that person is related to mental health or trauma, there are courts available that will try to provide and do provide the services needed and avoid a conviction for whatever charges are pending. And so we encourage prosecutors to utilize these courts. We encourage prosecutors also, quite frankly, for some people, their needs can be met without even involving the court. But there have to be referral sources for those people as well.
Great, thank you. Let me see here. So the next question we had, what about having available staff in housing agencies, which I believe will help some of the individuals being evicted to mental health behaviors instead of evicting? A lot of the low income programs are not equipped. How can we all get involved?
Yeah, it's a good idea. I think eviction is a big issue. in the mental health community. I know it was for my brother. Once again, I'll use that as an example. He has faced that as on multiple occasions. And I think part of the problem was when he wasn't getting the treatment he needed, or when the dosage of his medication was not, properly titrated. It changed over time. And he was the lucky one. He had a brother who's a psychiatrist, and his brother kept a real vigilant watch over him. But even there were times when he faced eviction. And I think frankly, we just need more mental health counselors in more government operations to get the help that people need. So much of what goes on in our world is driven by the lack of help early on when people as children begin to experience symptoms, and the lack of help once they become involved in the justice system. We really need to do a better job of catching things early and helping people so that, even a petty crime doesn't turn into something far worse.
Great, thank you. Let me see. Okay. How can we increase resources for the mental health community, in your opinion, without, I guess I'm trying to reword the question a little bit, but, just to, without necessarily taking away from others, or, how do we fight for that, or how do we go about increasing those the resources for the mental health community?
Well, it's kind of like you just have to do it. and it's advocacy in the General Assembly. It's advocacy in the budget. These are dollars that are so wisely spent, because look, I'd love it if our prosecutors were out of a job. I hate to say that, but if crime goes down appreciably, then that's a good thing. It's a really good thing. And I think it will go down if we can get at some of the issues that we see people facing in a more systemic way earlier on. And that means more mental health counselors in schools and otherwise. And I think with police departments, or working as adjuncts to police departments, I've had a lot of police officers say to me, we would so much prefer not to have to respond to situations that we know are rooted in mental illness. And if we don't have to respond and someone else can and get them the help they need, then that means I don't have to go back to that house. And I think that's just where our dollars ought to be, because it's clear that that's where many of the issues are. When we talk about our jails being full of people who have had undiagnosed mental illness or substance abuse, and they have never gotten help for it, or they don't know, how to get that help, then I think those dollars need to be spent on the problems early on, and as widely as the budgets allow.
And someone popped up and said, so where can we start? How do we implement these services with the housing programs, such as the HUD program, Section 8, public housing, et cetera?
It's advocacy. I think it's the advocacy of NAMI. I think it's advocacy of all mental health groups. I'm a real firm believer that citizens in this state, we are a small state, and we can make changes that a lot of states can't make, because we are small enough and nimble enough that we can make policy decisions and direct funds to the right places. But that requires citizens advocating for it. Write letters to your legislatures, write letters to the cabinet secretaries who manage housing or who manage other programs, labor, et cetera, Department of Education, just write. And there are groups in this state who could, say, we need a meeting. We need a meeting and we really just want to talk about mental health treatment. And this is what we believe is needed. And then demand answers. That's what we're here to do. We are here to serve you. And I think we have great legislators in the General Assembly. We have, a governor who truly believes in this trauma-informed care. And I just think it's a really good time for advocacy to take hold.
Thank you. And just to kind of mirror what she said, NAMI Delaware does do a lot of advocacy work along with a lot of organizations throughout the state. So it is something to keep in mind if you're looking to get involved. There might be an organization that can help you do so.
And I will say, we are, in the Law Enforcement Accountability Task Force, we're going to take a deep dive into issues of mental illness and police relationships. And I think that's a really good place for us to be, because this is the reality of what we're seeing. And this is also a source for advocacy, because we will make recommendations as a result of our subcommittee work to the General Assembly to recommend changes. I can't predict what the subcommittee will do, but if our convenings have been indicative of that, I think they're going to say, we need to fund mental health. We cannot expect police officers to be everything. It's not possible, and it's not fair, and it's not right. And so let's bring in the mental health experts to get treatment to people who need it, instead of having it devolve and devolve and devolve untreated and result in unlawful use of force or result in a shooting.
Great. Quickly, I'm going to just say this next question. It's one person asked, I am a new opioid outreach specialist. I work in the community. How can I get connected to the subcommittees?
We hold public meetings, and there is public comment permissible at the meetings. And I would say take a look on the General Assembly's website for meetings that you believe you would like to participate in. And we're going to make sure that you get an opportunity to talk, because those comments are incredibly valuable. We had one listening session last week, I believe it was. And that was an opportunity for members of the public and for advocacy groups. So I really encourage NAMI to do this, is to come and say what they think we should be looking at with respect to law enforcement and the communities that we serve. And so let's do it. NAMI, come to the next listening session. That's on the General Assembly's website as well. And put a pitch in, because this will be paid attention to. It's already risen, it's already bubbled up, it's already on the plate. And any other group in the state, please do it.
Great. Okay, so kind of shifting gears a little bit, someone asked, how might the current conditions, policies, and practices of the prison system impact trauma and poverty for incarcerated individuals and those who tend the prisons as people enter and are released from prisons? And this person also asked, are trauma-informed care, is that implemented in the prison system?
Sure. I think that the Commissioner of Corrections is working really hard to implement it. I know it's a priority of hers, and I know it's a priority of the governor's. And so that can be a big help, a really big help. It has been tough. I mean, with COVID rampant everywhere, and with COVID outbreaks in the prison system up and down the state, I think a lot of programs, unfortunately, have had to either slow down or be put on hold because there's, an element of human interaction that just can't take place right now. But going forward, yes, it is. There are really robust plans, and I really encourage you to invite the Commissioner of Corrections. She's full of great ideas and plans, and would really welcome an opportunity to talk about that. It is a time and place where we have literally a captive audience to address issues and to help them through their own, ongoing crises. And I believe that we all have the power to change. And I believe with the right help, there is, no matter what, we're always better than the worst thing we've ever done. And I believe in the power of redemption. I just think that people can help themselves if they're given the right tools. And that's really what we want the outcome to be, because 90% of people in prison will leave prison. We want people to leave much healthier and with the ability to earn a living and to live as peaceful, contributing members of society, part of that state of neighbors.
Great. And someone followed up this with, when someone with a mental health condition is released from prison, are they connected to mental health services at discharge and for the months to follow?
Yes. If there has been a diagnosed mental health issue, they are connected to mental health services. It is generally a condition of their aftercare, so they are required to get those services. There are a lot of issues, I think, around that we could get into. There are transportation issues, there are monetary issues, there are a lot of issues. But I will say this, that the follow-up care people, probation officers, social workers, mental health professionals who do the follow-up care, they are really working to make sure that someone succeeds and doesn't fail. And that's a change. That's kind of a sea change. And like all changes, it takes time, because I remember years ago when the judges on our court, and they didn't know any better, this isn't a criticism, they used to say, okay, when you go out of jail and you're on probation, there will be zero tolerance for drugs or alcohol. So yeah, predictably, the person is back in front of the court with a violation of probation within a month, because they didn't, how can they go from being addicted to zero, right? We now know that is absolutely unrealistic, and we're not in the office. No one is asking for those zero tolerance conditions, and I don't think any judges are imposing those anymore, because we have all learned a great deal. And the idea here is we are going to work with people to get them better, not punish them when they fall.
Thank you. So we are running a little bit short on time, so I think this may be our last question. We'll see how it goes. But how might programs where mental health officer collaboration programs be utilized to support access and support for officers, similar to the CDCP program, which originated and providers in supporting individuals, such as programs like the it originated in New Haven, Connecticut, which was replicated by the Wilmington PD and Prevention and Behavioral Health Services. Is this type of collaboration a consideration for the future?
Yes, 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 and yes. As I said, there are many police agencies in this state. It's wonderful to see who are partnering with mental health professionals. They're also, partnering with DSAM to have mental health referrals at the time that someone that they're called out to a scene, or they're called out on a complaint. And when it's safe to do it, they're in some parts of Delaware, they are being referred directly to mental health treatment. And there's a mental health counselor at DSAM who is available 24/7. So they're getting that treatment right then and there. I would like to see that statewide in every police department. It will make a difference. And the police have embraced it. But now the question that's being asked of me is, how do the police help themselves to get their own mental health treatment? And again, it's leadership. You cannot underestimate the power of leadership and how police officers, like people in my office, will follow the example of leadership. And if there's a culture of help and a culture of understanding, then it's much easier for people to get the help that they need. So I think that was the last question, but I'm happy to answer more, but I know you're out of time. And I just want to say thank you. Your questions are really, they show the heart that all of you have. You want to help, you want to make our state, our world a better place. I'm optimistic. I believe our world is going to be a better place. And I believe that the future will be so much brighter thanks to the work of all of you. And as always, it is one of my favorite days when I get to come talk with NAMI. So thank you, Amanda, for hosting this, and take care, everyone. Hope to see you soon, and actually see you soon once we have a vaccine.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Attorney General. And just so everyone knows, this was recorded and will be up on NAMI's website for 30 days after the conference if you would like to revisit anything that was talked about today. We appreciate you taking the time out, and we hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their night.
Thank you. Take care.